On the phone, we have former Major League pitcher. He pitched for 6 different teams during his career, most notably the Yankees, the White Sox, and the Dodgers. He was a 4-time All-Star, 288 career wins. Tommy John. How you doing, Mr. John?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Really good.
So when you came up with the Indians in the early 60s, you had a pretty good pitching staff there.
You know, it's funny. I played on a few major league teams, and it's like every team I played on, we had good staffs. Cleveland had some good arms. Sam McDowell. Well, when I first came up, you had Mudcat Grant, Keon, Gary Bell, Jack Kralik, Jim Perry, not Gaylord, but Jim, Sam McDowell. We had some pretty good arms. And then I was traded over to the White Sox, and we had even better arms over there.
Were you surprised when you were with the White Sox that they couldn't win a pennant?
Well, we could pitch, but we didn't hit. And unfortunately, it takes both aspects to win games, to win championships. And I was talking about this the other day. Our teams back in the 60s had a team ERA under 3, and yet we could not win on a consistent basis because we didn't have any power. Couldn't score runs.
Because would you have Bill Melton with the Sox back in the late 60s, and that was about it?
Well, late 60s was Melton came up in 69, 70, somewhere around there. But we had Pete Ward, Tommy Agee, Don Buford, Tom McCraw, Ronnie Hansen, Honey Bear Romano, Jerry McNerney catching, Dwayne Josephson, Floyd Robinson, Kenny Berry. And, we had a good team. We had a very good team, but we just couldn't get the job done.
Well, that was back in the day when pitchers still hit, Maybe they needed more hitting from you.
Gary Peters hit one night. We're playing in Yankee Stadium, and he hit like 7 in the order. And I can't think who hit 8th and 9th, but we ragged them for the next month.
He probably had a better...
Players wouldn't do that.
Pardon?
Baseball players wouldn't do that to one another, would they?
Oh, no, not at all. I tell you, if the people heard what went on in clubhouse, the politically correct people would not believe we say what we say. But it's not malicious. It's just guys liking guys, and we just say some horrible things. I mean, horrible things, and everybody's just laughing like that. But that's life in the locker room. You know what I mean?
Oh, exactly. I mean, you had some characters on the White Sox and Indians back in the 60s. Mudcat Grant, I mean, he was a true character from what I heard.
Well, Mudcat, Gary Bell was a prankster. Sam McDowell was. I mean, we all had our little share of things that we did, and I mean, I was afraid to because I was just a baby. I was, as they said back then, I was a green pea, and you just shut up and kept your mouth shut and learned and let the veterans. I remember one time we were in spring training, and I'm leaving the movies. And I looked in back of me, and Dick Donovan is walking, and he said, "Hey, Tommy, how are you?" He said, that was a good movie, wasn't it? And I said, "Oh, yeah." I laughed, and, blah, blah, blah. And he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I don't know, back to the hotel." And he said, "Well, let's go get an ice cream soda or a milkshake or something." And a veteran pitcher asked a raw rookie to go do something like that. Oh, my gosh, my mouth was dropped, and yeah, sure. And then Dick was he was a reader, and I read a lot, and that's what he asked me. He said, "You read a lot, don't you?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "Great, gosh," he said, "I'm really glad to see that." He said, "I'm going to give you a list of books and see how many of them you've read, and the ones you don't, get them and read them, and then we'll talk about them." My heaven's sakes alive, I would have read them if he would have given me War and Peace or something. I would have read the sucker.
And then when you went to the Dodgers, I mean, you had some characters in that clubhouse too with Tommy Lasorda. I know Jimmy Wynn was laughing. He said when he went to the Dodgers, he put on a ton of weight because of the food in that clubhouse.
Well, back in the day, we didn't. Food in the clubhouse was after ball game was chips and nuts and Cokes and a beer, and that was it. And then nowadays, my God, nowadays it's a 7-course meal, and the guys complain if it's not done to their expectation. Times have changed, but Lasorda would have food before the game. That's where Tommy would get it. He would get guys would come in and leave him. There was a Chinese restaurant in L.A. called Paul's Kitchen, and every night one of the hangers on that Tommy's friends would go down to Paul's Kitchen, and they would bring him 6-7 different entrees that they would go down and eat and all that. And you go into Lasorda's room after batting practice, and you would be dining on sweet and sour chicken or ribs or whatever. And Tommy didn't miss many meals. That's for sure.
Well, and then years later, he gets a weight loss endorsement out of it.
Well, yeah, but yeah, and he supposedly he gave that money to the sisters that taught him when he was in elementary school back in Norristown. He supposedly gave it to the money that he got that he gave to them, and Tommy works at all angles.
He doesn't pay for many meals though, from what I heard.
No, he doesn't. He has deep pockets and short arms.
Those Dodger teams were something else though, with that infield with Say and Lopes and Garvey and Russell.
Well, the first game I pitched for the Dodgers in '72. Garvey was my third baseman, Maury Wills was my shortstop, Jimmy Lefevre was my second baseman, and Wes Parker was my first baseman. And that was a pretty good infield, except for Garvey couldn't throw. But and then they gave him a first base glove and told him, learn how to play first base, and he certainly did. He learned how to play first base.
How good a first baseman was Wes Parker? I remember him as being just outstanding.
Outstanding. He had very, very soft hands, and he knew how to play. And I'll tell you, somebody else that was a good first baseman, although he didn't play it a lot, was Ron Fairley. Ron was a good first baseman, but Wes was better. I mean, golly, he had just these real soft hands, and plus he was a switch hitter, a good hitter, hit a lot of triples, hit a lot of doubles, and he was a good ball player.
Your first base with the Yankees at the end of your career was pretty good too, and Don Mattingly.
Yes, he was. Donnie had good hands. Donnie was a good fielder, but Donnie was an outstanding hitter too.
Now, your first All-Star game was '68, and then your next one was '78. How gratifying was it to make the ones in '78, '79, and '80 after all that time?
Well, I thought I should have made it in '74 when I hurt my elbow. I didn't get picked. The Dodgers, Steve Rogers, it was the thing where every team had to be represented, and the only guy that could go with the Expos or from the Expos was Steve Rogers. So that was a starting pitcher that was taken, and the Dodgers had Messersmith and Mike Marshall, and back in those days, you couldn't have 3 or 4 pitchers off one team. go to the All-Star game. So at 13-3, I got left off, and then I hurt my arm with 2 games to go before the All-Star game. But conceivably, I could have been 15-3 and not made the All-Star team.
Wow.
You played for some great managers in Lasorda and Billy Martin. Who was the best manager you played for?
Well, all in all, Lasorda was the best for making it fun to play ball. Tommy was the best. Tommy was really good at that. But the guy that was really good at managing the game was Al Lopez. Was very, very good. And the guy that took Al's place, Eddie Stanky, was an absolute genius when it came down to that. Gene Mock was good at managing the game, although Gene didn't understand pitching. Never did, and it cost him a couple of trips to the World Series.
Yeah, with a couple of teams.
Yeah.
Could those managers from back then still manage in today's game, do you think?
Al Lopez could. Eddie Stanky, no way. No. Eddie came back and managed for one night with the Texas Rangers. And supposedly the conversation was he went out to the mound to get the ball from Mike Marshall, and Mike looked at him and he said, "What the F are you doing out here?" And Eddie said, "Yeah, you're right." He said, "I wondered the same thing." He turned around and walked back, and when the night was over, he was there one game. He managed one game and quit.
If he would have said that, if he would have said that to Billy Martin, would Billy Martin have said?
Billy couldn't have managed in this game. Dick Hauser could have. Lasorda could have. Clyde King could have. The guys. Gene Mock couldn't, because Gene read the game. They called him the general, and Gene read the game pretty rigid. And guys today, it's more of a looser style. But Lopez was so good because what he did is just, here's the bats, here's the balls, go play. And, and let's tee it up tomorrow if we lose.
Now, do you get any royalties anytime it's Tommy John surgery is mentioned? I think if you did, you'd be a zillionaire by now.
Oh, no, I don't. But there's a lot of kids having them, and there's a lot of kids that are going to have them.
When you had to have
what was it like going through that surgery? When there was no track record on a Tommy John surgery.
Well, Dr. Job, and this is the thing that I believed in what he was telling me. Dr. Job said, if you don't have it done, you'll never pitch Major League Baseball again. And I said, okay. And he said, but if you do have it done, the chances are you won't pitch Major League Baseball again. Well, never and maybe is a far better chance than never. So I believe Dr. Job, and I said, let's have it done.
Pitchers nowadays, when they get that surgery, they're back in 12 months throwing again, and a lot of them are throwing harder than they did before. Was that the case with you?
I don't know how hard I threw before because we didn't have radar guns, thank God. Radar guns are the worst thing that happened in baseball, and it's the thing that I think probably lends itself to more Tommy John surgeries than anything is the radar gun, because kids pitch to the radar gun. They go out there and throw as hard as they can and all this to light up the gun. And with me, I pitched in a ball game 1 year, 1 day after surgery.
Wow. Well, and that's pitching, not throwing. And I think that's what separates a lot of guys that step onto that mound is knowing that changing speeds isn't going from 95 to 93, and location is one of the keys to all that.
Well, that's the thing. Location and movement are much, much better than speed. That's why it took me a while to figure out what I had to do to get myself to where I could pitch when I didn't have my good stuff. And And it took me until halfway into the next year for me to be able to pitch and pitch effectively.
I know Mike Marshall, your former teammate, basically says that if pitchers don't throw enough and they don't throw the correct way, and if they follow his system, they would have less injuries.
Yeah, he probably kinesiologically his is probably the most sound method of throwing, but it looks so funny, and all this. I mean, it's sound. It's mechanically sound and all this, but it would take 6-8 generations of pitchers to come through, before it's just, if you've ever seen it, it looks funny, but it makes sense. It makes anatomically good sense, but it's just convincing the people that that's the way that you have to throw.
You ever think we'll see a return to the 4-man rotation on a regular basis?
I don't see any reason at 100 pitches. I don't see any reason why you couldn't do it.
But for some reason, teams seem to be reluctant. It's like you got to go every day.
Yeah, they're reluctant because they don't want to hurt arms or whatever. So, and I understand that. That makes sense to me.
But you still see arms getting hurt, even with the 5-man rotation.
Because they don't throw enough in between. Yeah, they don't throw enough. They have their throwing program, throwing 200 feet and all that stuff, but you just have to throw, and it strengthens your arm, and there's no reason why a guy can't pitch 100 pitches every 4 days.
I know Billy Martin got criticized in the early 80s with the A's for blowing out that young pitching staff by over-pitching them. You think, was that the start of basically teams deciding, we got to go to 4-man rotations and limit pitchers with pitch counts?
Well, no, I think what happened with Billy is he left a lot of guys in. He left a lot of guys in games. I'm trying to think of the pitcher. Langford. Not George Langford. Rick Langford. Pitched 14 innings one game, and everybody said, Billy let him go 14 innings. But the guy only threw like 125 pitches in 14 innings. And that's not a lot of pitches. But people were saying 14 innings, but he didn't throw a lot of pitches. So, he had Steve McCaddy, and he had Langford, and he had Norris. And I'm trying to think of the fourth pitcher they had.
McCarthy? Steve McCarty?
Yeah, McCaddy. And I'm trying to think. I forget now. But anyhow, Billy got chastised over that. But, he was trying to win, and those were his best pitchers, and their arms were sound, and, and he went with them.
Once upon a time, Harvey Haddix won 13 innings, right?
Well, I pitched a game, if you go back when I was with the Angels in 83 or 84, I pitched like 12 or 13 innings in a ball game, and, came back 5 days later, and I pitched again. And, I have no idea how many pitches I threw, but they kept asking me, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I'm fine.
What do you think about the controversy with Reggie Jackson now when he said that A-Rod should not be in the Hall of Fame? Then he came out and said Phil Niekro shouldn't be in, and he mentioned a bunch of other players. Is that just Reggie being Reggie?
Well, that's Reggie being Reggie, and I think when you work for a ball club like the Yankees, your opinion is not your opinion. It's the ball club's opinion, and I think that it's like me. I work for a law firm, and the law firm, if I would say disparaging remarks about the law firm, then they're going to hold my feet to the fire, and that's what the Yankees did with Reggie. And should Reggie be allowed to have his opinion? Yeah, bounds.
Speaking of a Hall of Fame, what's it going to take to get you in?
I don't have any idea. I to tell you. I don't know. I don't know. I thought I did at one time. I thought I knew, but I think what it is now, I just think that if it happens, it happens, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. Then I'm not going to worry myself over it, truthfully.
Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you, Mr. John.